So my name is Gustav. I'm here with Ramon, who we're both from Y Combinator in California in the United States. And super thankful and happy to be here. Been wanting to go here for a long time. We've had a lot of people applying to Y Combinator from Ukraine. So it's really great to finally be here. A quick background about myself. So I joined Y Combinator in November as a part-time partner and full-time earlier this summer in June. For the last 5 years, I worked at Airbnb, running the product growth team at Airbnb from the beginning of the growth team until when I left, we were over 140 people or something like that on the growth team. Cool. Bit about Y Combinator. What is Y Combinator? Y Combinator is a program that we invest in companies. Twice a year, we invest in a small amount of money in a large amount of companies. And we've been doing this since 2005. It was started by Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston and two other partners back in 2005. And it has since grown to be a much larger organizations, investing in much more startups. But that's basically how the company, how Y Combinator was started. We have a standard deal. We invest $120,000 for 7% of common stock. That's how we've been doing it basically all the way since the beginning. Our program runs twice a year, which is January through March, and then June through August. And to apply to the program, you just go to our website, ycombinator.com, and click apply. One of the big differences between Y Combinator and many other investors is how easy it is to basically apply to the program. We don't require you to know anyone. We don't require you to be in San Francisco. We don't require you to have a lot of pre-knowledge on how this stuff works. You basically just have a company and you're a founder and you go to our website and you apply. Since 2005, we've funded over 1,400 startups. Vast majority of them are still alive. Some of them are very successful. 28% of the companies that we've funded are from outside of the United States. This number keeps increasing as we see more and more people around the world expecting the same kind of services and the same kind of things that Silicon Valley is building. So we've seen a large uptick of founders from all around the world, Southeast Asia, Europe, South America, over the last couple of years. There are at least 3 Ukrainian companies that done YC, GitLab, Kyiv, and Sixa. There might be more, hopefully not forgetting anyone, but these are at least 3 other ones. People AI. Sorry, I'm forgetting one more. It's a little bit tricky to keep tracking everyone. And so far, Y Combinator is a community of over 3,500 founders. So some of the most successful Y Combinator companies are Airbnb, Dropbox, Stripe, Cruise, Coinbase, and some of the more recent ones. To date, the total value of all the Y Combinator companies that we have invested in is over $85 billion US. And this value continues to increase. I think a more interesting number is how many of the companies that are significant. So there are 10 companies that are worth over $1 billion, and there are 64 companies worth over $100 million. Now, is valuation a great metric to measure the success of companies? It is not the best metrics. It's hard to get a standardized metric, so we look at this one as something that is true for all the companies. But there are certainly other ways to look at the success of a company, not just the valuation. So when you apply to Y Combinator, what actually happens there? So the program has basically evolved through those 10 years by learnings that we've had of what works and what doesn't work. Every week, and we've been doing this since day one, we have weekly dinners. And the weekly dinners means that all the companies that do in the program, they meet you basically come there from 2 o'clock until like 9 or 10 p.m. each night. And some of them are doing group office hours in the morning or in the afternoon, and then the dinner starts at 5 o'clock. And at those dinners, we invite speakers. So the speakers typically are some of the more successful existing companies. This is the Airbnb founders coming to one of the dinners in the last batch, to the WhatsApp founders, to any of various degrees of very successful companies, to more recent founders. They can talk about their recent experience in the last batch, for example. So we basically try to give a pretty varied set of speakers that to give the most amount of value to the founders. The other thing that we've been developing over time is what we call office hours. And I met with some of you guys today. Office hours basically means that we have a set time that we meet with the companies each week. And that basically usually means that one of the group partners meet with the companies and give feedback. And the office hours are meant to be a short kind of, say, a half an hour or 40 minutes interaction between the founders and a group partner, or in some cases an expert. And people will bring one or two problems to the founders or to the partners that they want to discuss. And we usually go through just one or two things and try to be as focused as possible during that time. We also do something we call group office hours, which means you meet with other founders in your group each week, where we give more and open feedback, where you can hear from other companies in your same batch about the challenges that they have. Turns out that many of the challenges that the companies have are actually very similar, regardless of if you're a different type of company. They're the type of challenges people go through, and when you go through Y Combinator, are actually very, very similar. Outside of our schedule, we have something called Startup School. We organize this once a year. This means we invite thousands of people to come to our events, where we basically bring some of the best speakers and try to just foster more entrepreneurship. So why should you apply to Y Combinator? The best way is probably ask any of the founders that have done it. They can tell you their honest story about what they found valuable. But we found three things being the most valuable. So the first one is focus. So when you start a company, it's very easy to make some of the mistakes other companies make. In fact, that's probably one of the most likely reason that you will fail as a founder is you make a mistake that someone else already made. So we can help with that. We've seen over 1,400 companies so far, and we can see what kind of pitfalls that they have happened and which ones that you should avoid. So focusing on the right things, and I'll just give an example. Someone applies to Y Combinator and get accepted. In the first week, the first thing I ask them is I focus on two things. One is, how do you know if you're successful? Like, what metric do you use to know if you're actually going to become successful? And once we come to a conclusion what that metric should be, we set a goal. And the goal is the demo day goal, or after demo day. Ideally, you use the same metric, like way after demo day, and you don't change it. But the most important thing here is to have something through which you measure yourself with. This leads to higher focus, because every time you're doing something, you're asking yourself, is what I'm doing now actually going to impact this metric or not? The second part of YC is fundraising. So by having such a strong focus in the 3 months as part of the program, at the end of the program, we have something called Demo Day, where we invite 700 investors in person, another 2,000 investors watching from home, and you get to present your startup to all of those investors. We've also helped with legal documentation to make fundraising cheap and easy and simple, to really try to avoid expensive legal bills and non-standard investment agreements. So we really try to help the founders to have as simple ways of raising funding as possible. And the last part here is the network. So a lot of companies that do, for example, B2B or sell to enterprises or sell to other companies, they will join Y Combinator because there are 1,400 other companies that they can sell to. And it turns out that the most likely of your customers when you do Y Combinator is other Y Combinator companies. That's how you get started. Very often, the first 20, 30, 40 customers that you have are other existing Y Combinator companies, and they will answer the email, and they will actually make the extra effort to try a non-polished product, which is often what, as a founder, you have in the early days. You struggle with that. You struggle with having something that's not fully ready to sell, but you really need is the customer feedback. The second part of my talk is about growth. My experience running growth at Airbnb is obviously focused on consumer, so building growth for consumers. Some of this is absolutely directly transferable to B2B companies and other type of companies, and not just consumer companies. And the principles I'm trying to present here absolutely applies to most type of software companies. So if the first thing you want to figure out, and I'll come to this in a second, is some of the stuff you learn here, you kind of have to do in order. If you do it in the wrong order, you will screw up your company. If you start working on top of the funnel growth before you have a product that people love using, then you're doing things wrong. So it's really important that you build something people want first before you apply some of the growth learning style walkthrough here. I'll help you. There's some of the slides that talk about how to actually build something people want and how to actually know that you've done that. So let's say you are a product manager for a company and you are starting to grow and you build something that people want, and then you come to work and you show you this slide and this graph. And this graph basically shows you the monthly new users of your product. When you look at this slide, what comes to mind? Any ideas what comes to mind?
No product analytics, no cohorts.
No cohorts. Any other ideas?
Significant drop.
There's a significant drop here. Any other ideas of what comes to mind?
Seasonality.
Seasonality. Any other ideas?
Okay,
We don't know.
We don't know.
there's a hockey stick.
Great, great. Someone said the hockey stick. So the point here is there are absolutely some anomalies in here. There's some things that look weird, but they're actually is going up. There's something here that makes this specific product growing, and it'd be very interesting to understand why it's growing. And it's very common that people somehow think that if you built a great product, it will just grow. Like in the law of nature, it will just grow. Well, that is only partly true. Like if you build something that grows, it will grow to a certain point, and it will have a certain amount of natural growth. But a lot of the growth of the really successful companies is accelerating that growth by applying principles and specific tactics to keep growing something faster. So the ideal state of a product, and this is not true for all product, is a product that grows by the function of the new users. So for example, if you are Quora and you have more people answering questions, then you will continue growing by the function of SEO users. If you're Airbnb, you get more hosts and you end up getting more guests because they end up want to book. If you are Uber and you get more drivers or more riders, then that kind of keeps growing itself. That's the ideal state. Not every single product has that kind of network effect or flywheel, but that's kind of what you want. Now, this is the graph that I showed all the new hires on the growth team at Airbnb when they joined the growth team and asked me, why is growth important? Because it turns out that a lot of people just think that growth is just natural. You have a great product and you're going to continue to grow. So it turns out there's another company, Facebook, that actually went through this exact thing that Airbnb is going through, where you have these opportunities to reaccelerate your growth. And I wanted to talk through that and see how the difference between the natural adoption of a company and what happens if you actually pay attention to your growth and spend a lot of time reaccelerating your growth and making specific decisions to drive growth. So Facebook started their growth team around 2007, 2008. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's a line here that kind of ends at 250 million. That's how many users they have around that. In 2008, Facebook were about 250 million users. And Facebook had a great data science team, and they were making excellent forecasts. And the forecast would say that we're going to be around 400 million users by 2015. That's what their forecast said. We all knew that that's not true. And at multiple stages in Facebook history, Facebook figured things out that accelerated their growth rate. Specifically, they figured something out in 2008. Anyone have any idea what happened in 2008? When Facebook reaccelerated their growth rate, they started growing faster, and they kind of get to new plateau.
Newsfeed.
Newsfeed games. You actually got it right away. Internationalization. This is the national audience. Well, there's a non-US audience. You guys know this. But Facebook, what they were thinking back in 2006 or 2007 is that, well, the content of Facebook is in your local language. Facebook is in English, and that's fine because most people speak English, or most people don't need to understand the rest of the site. It turns out that most people didn't want that. They actually wanted Facebook in their own language. And it was all the way until 2008 when Facebook actually built a translation engine that translated the entire site. And they went from 0 to 200 languages in a matter of a month. So this was the main first reacceleration of Facebook growth, when they figured out that translation and internationalization is absolutely critical to grow internationally. Now, the same thing happened again in 2010, where Facebook's growth started plateauing. Their data science team made a forecast, and the forecast said, by 2015, we'll be about 600 million users. We won't hit the billion. We won't be the billion user company. We'll be 600 million users. And they started thinking, and they came up with something. And that massively reaccelerated their growth. Anyone remember what happened around 2010, 2011?
They bought Instagram.
Build girls team up.
Mobile. There's like 3 different things on mobile there. Yes, they basically figured out mobile. So what happened in 2010, when you made that forecast, is you didn't take account by the fact that most new people were switching their behavior from web to mobile. And a lot of the new people that are coming online were coming on mobile, and they were mobile users first. That's how they were accessing Facebook. And Facebook before then did not, well, they maybe have a mobile website, certainly didn't have optimized mobile products. They weren't very good at mobile. They made a bunch of mistakes along the way, and it took them a while to figure out that mobile was going to be the big thing. So the same thing happened again around 2013, 2014. The Facebook stopped growing, or kind of didn't grow as fast anymore. They came to a plateau, and then they figured something out. And I remember it happened in 2013. You could say Instagram, you could say WhatsApp, these are good answers.
Messenger. Feed algorithm.
No, what I was thinking about here is you kind of hit in the top of the chart. Like it doesn't go any further. Messenger, these are all good answers actually. That actually would have been the right answers. What I'm looking for here is the fact that they were running out of people that were online. So back in 2013, there were only about 2.5 billion people online. And Facebook was suddenly hitting out. They were actually, the majority of the users were already on Facebook, and they didn't need to get more people online. So the growth team at Facebook started figuring out, how do we get more people to get online? Well, it turns out the data on your cell phone was really expensive around the world. And they basically struck a ton of deals around the world with carriers to provide free data, basically free Facebook, for people that never used data or internet before. So the growth team became internet.org, or Free Basics. And basically, all they did for a couple of years was trying to get more people online. And this effort led to another 100 to a couple hundred million users getting on Facebook, because these are people that before that were actually not online. So these are not necessarily 3 things that apply to your company. There probably aren't the 3 things that apply to your company. But there's a point here. The point here is that the first forecast said 400 million users, but they ended up at 2 billion users. So there's a big delta between 400 million users and 2 billion users. Well, that was making the right decisions to make sure that you can reaccelerate your growth and understand that the decision that you make actually leads to that kind of growth. So for your company, there'll be other kinds of decisions that will do this kind of thing, but the core thing to remember is you can actually impact this. Having a great product and having national adoption doesn't automatically lead to this. The delta between these 2 things is actually all the work that you do to accelerate your growth. So this is what I showed in New Hire Airbnb, and then I basically said we are here, and we have all this to go, and there's a lot of work we need to do, and we are the one who's going to do it. So great products have national adoption. We can forecast the national adoption, but that will slow down over time. As an engineer, or as a founder, or as a product manager, or a designer, you can impact your growth rate, and you can actually grow faster than you think. Once you come to this realization, then there's just unlimited amount of things you can do. So your growth rate for your company is going to be something else. It's going to be a declining growth rate that you can drive by doing specific optimizations, maybe SEO, maybe general optimizations, maybe referrals. It kind of really depends on the company. But the core thing here is to know that what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase and lift your growth rate to keep growing faster. So the next point I want to talk about is how to figure out that you made something that people want. So the main kind of like principle of Y Combinator is to make something people want. And this comes from one of our partners, Paul Buchheit. He was the founder of Gmail. And his idea was basically, it's better to have 100 people that love my product than 1 million people that kind of like it. It's better to have 100 people that love it than 1 million that kind of like it. Why is that? Well, you don't really learn anything from the 1 million that kind of like it, but you learn a ton from the 100 that love it. So if you find the 100 people that love it, well, then you just need to find all the other ones that love it already. Then your product is good enough for some amount of people. So making something that people really, really love is basically the main principle of Y Combinator. I think companies are much better at this today. But back in the days in 2005, still the hardest thing is to make great products. And back at the time, people were great at all the other stuff, but not at making great products. Because making great products is the really, really hard part. And you can kind of pretend having a great company while having a bad product, but it doesn't make you a great company. The most important thing of a great company is having a great product. Absolutely the most important thing. So how do you know you have a great product? There are really two ways. One is to look at data, and two is to talk to users, or actually listen to users, doing user research. Ideally, in the beginning, you want to do both, but the latter is the one that's the easiest, accessible. So going out of your building, going out of your office, and talking to the people using your product is going to be the easiest way to understand if you have users that love your product. So this thing I want to talk about here is the quantitative side of it. So how do you actually measure that people like using your product? So the goal here is to know when you made something that people want. That's the goal. When you know that, then you succeed with your goal. So there's basically only two steps. The first step you want to do is you want to figure out the metric, some data point that most accurately represent the product value that your product gives users. So, for example, if I'm a newspaper, the product value is the pleasure of reading news on that newspaper or an online news site. If I'm a game, it's the value of actually playing that game, when I'm enjoying the game. If it's food delivery, is when the food are being delivered. It's the value that people get when they understand how valuable your product is. That's the value you want to figure out the metric for. So you want to figure out that metric, and figure out those data points. And then the next thing is you want to have a time window. I'm going to come back to that slide. You want to have a time window for how often you expect people to do these things. So some specific examples of these metrics. So in Airbnb's case, the number of bookings is the critical one here. So a booking is the representation of the value someone gets from Airbnb. Actually, it's actually the stay, but the booking is kind of a proxy for the stay. In Facebook's case, it's the monthly active users. So people that come back to Facebook every single month, that's the metric that we're looking for. In Medium, it's the total time spent reading. That's a good representation of the value you get from Medium. None of these things are new users. None of them are registrations. They're all some very, very active, specific metric to measure the value you get. In the case of Uber, it's the number of rides taken. So once you have this metric, you want to figure out how often should I expect people to do this. Let's take some examples. So let's say Uber, rides taken. How often should I expect someone to take rides in Uber? Well, in the beginning, maybe once a month. But eventually, maybe every week. Maybe taking one ride on Uber every week is kind of like on average, then you're very kind of an active Uber user. If you're a driver on Uber, maybe it's about the same. Maybe it's like multiple times a week you should be an Uber driver. In Airbnb's case, it's more like once a year, because you shouldn't expect someone to travel on Airbnb more than once or maybe twice a year. In Facebook, well, this kind of says it all. It is a monthly behavior. Today, Facebook is more like a daily behavior. So they measure the daily active users just as intensely as they measure the monthly active users. So let's take a local news app, for example. I have a local news app. My metric here is the returning visits, so people that come back to my news app. And then the question I'm going to ask myself, how often should I expect people to come back? Well, in this case, let's say it's weekly, because daily would be a little bit too often, but maybe let's call it weekly. So my metric, my North Star metric that I'm going to use to measure if people love my product is how many people are coming back, not coming for the first time, on a weekly basis. That's the metric I'm going to use to understand if I build something that people want. Now, remember this, the weekly active returning visitors. The second thing you want to do is you want to understand how these data points looks over time. So the metric is weekly active returning users. And I want to measure the number of weekly active returning users every single week. And when I do that, that plots a graph. So if I take week 1, everyone has started using it on week 0, and then I measure that number, which is the returning users each week over time, then that's going to make a graph. And that graph can look in different ways. And the way the graph looks will really help you understand if you made something people want. If the graph looks like that, you've not made something people want. Because the number of people that are coming back to your app is decreasing every single week. You get fewer and fewer people using your product. And if that's the case with your product, you basically have two different things that happen. Either you not made something great, or you made something and showed it to the wrong people, to the wrong audience. So these things can happen even if you have a great product. But generally speaking, if people are not coming back to your product, they stop coming back to it and stop doing the thing that they're supposed to do to get product value, there is no product value. You haven't made something great. But if instead it looks something like this, where it starts flattening it out, and then eventually you'll get a flat line. Then everyone below that flat line, let's say that's 25% or 30% of the people that tried your product, keep using your product. They keep coming back after 12 weeks, after 18 weeks, after 24 weeks. Well, these are people that love your product so much that after 24 weeks, they come back every single week. I would call that product love. For those people, you build something that they want, and you build something that is valuable. So how many here are measuring the retention of your product? Great, you guys are doing awesome. Second thing I want to talk about is once you become a big company, most companies, even by regulation, have a finance department. The finance department keeps track of money. And if you can't keep track of money, you basically you're basically like losing a few $100s, you're failing. You have to keep track of every single money super accurately. Now, how many people have a growth department or a user department that keep track of users just as accurately as you keep track of money? Turns out most big companies are way better at tracking money than they are at tracking users. They're actually pretty bad at tracking users. You generally don't know how many you have. So this is an innovation that came from Facebook. They call it growth accounting, which is basically the idea that you can track users the way you track money. It's actually not that complicated. It's very, very simple. In the old world, let's say a couple of years ago, you would say, I got 2,000 new users. And that's it. Great. I got 2,000 new users. And then somehow you would assign some amount of value to that, if that was good or bad. Well, most people think that's good because you didn't say anything else. But what's actually hiding behind this, and this is like a very, very simplification of this, what's hiding behind that is a bunch of other things. So let's say I did get 2,000 new users, but in that same time period, I lost 2,500 users that no longer use my product. Is that now a good or bad thing? It was actually, it turns out to be a bad thing, like because I actually lost users. But I gained some other users that came back, people that previously used my product and now are using my product. And the real number that I would want it to measure here is what I call the net new users. This is very simple. It looks very similar to like a financial statement, but it's focusing on the number of users you have on a time period. So in this case, it would be, let's say, a month or a week or something like that. And by applying something like growth accounting, it does help you understand and you take this number, put this on the graph as well, and plot it, you'll see how your usage and your users are changing over time. And it will absolutely tell you, just like retention, if your product is getting better, is getting worse. If you stop growing with new users, will you have any users left in a couple of years or a couple of months? The next thing I want to talk about is probably the most important lesson I had from Airbnb, and that is around how we make decisions. So they're basically, historically, a good founder, a good product manager, or a good engineer would make decisions by their gut. So what's your gut? Your gut is a set of patterns that you developed by seeing the same scenario many, many times. And based on all those data points in that scenario, you make a decision. Now, this is basically what experimentation is and data science is as well. So Mixpanel, some of you guys have probably heard of this, put out their investor deck online a couple of years ago. And the first slide of their investor deck said this: most of the world will make decisions by either guessing or using their gut. Those people will either be lucky or wrong. What this means that if you make a decision and you use your gut and you succeed, you were basically lucky. And if you make a decision and you fail, and that was a wrong decision, then you were wrong. And it's really, really bad to rely on something where you're going to be lucky to win. So it's much better to have something where you don't have to be lucky. So the answer to all of this is experimentation. And any of you guys here who went to engineering school or science school or basically are as a scientist and understand this, you know that this is how we basically make decisions all around the world, in physics and biology, all over. But this is not how we made decisions historically in product management or in how we develop a new product. But if you ask any product manager at Airbnb, what's the most important tool that you had at Airbnb, they would say it's the experimentation framework. So here's a scenario in a product team. You're going to launch a new product, and you're going to do that on this Wednesday. And the PM says, I want to ship this new product, and the engineer is ready to ship it. The metric went up. So that was great, right? Or not. Like, how do you really know that what you shipped here is the cost of this going up? The way our mind works is that we connect these two things. Because we said, oh, we shipped something, so they must be related. But we don't really know, because we don't have a counterfactual. We don't really know how things would have gone if they weren't actually, if we didn't ship this. So there's only really one answer to know if the metric went up because we shipped this feature or not. And that's by having a view of the world of what would have happened if we didn't ship it. So this is what experimentation is all about. So this is a counterfactual to what happened if we didn't ship it. So this basically means that shipping this was a good thing. By shipping this feature, we did actually incrementally increase whatever metric we're measuring here. And the only way to know that that was the case is to have a control group. You basically take your user base, split it in half, and one of the group is the blue group, and the other one is the red group. And in this case, it turns out that this was a better outcome because we shipped something that was actually turned out to be positive. So this turns out to be such a powerful tool to make decisions in product team that we made this into an entire kind of culture at Airbnb. We built something even that we call experiment review. So experiment review is basically we met once every 2 weeks with the growth team or other teams, just like we're doing here, and we showed all the things that we shipped. And it's very easy to have strong opinions about great products if the answer is not on the next slide. But experiment review, the answer of what was the right decision was always on the next slide, which makes having strong opinions a little harder. So I'm going to go through 3 examples here of things that we shipped. And you will understand that relying on your gut or having strong opinions or having a huge ego when it comes to product is kind of tricky. So we were trying to get more shares of listing on Airbnb. So in the background here, you see the Los Angeles listing. And up here, you can click on the share button. And we wanted to figure out if there's a way for us to get more shares. So we wanted to try a new share sheet. So this is our new share sheet, which had a bunch of buttons for different messaging opportunities like WhatsApp and Messenger and Facebook. And this was the standard share sheet that everyone was used to. So the standard one you guys know, because this is the one you use in most applications, had the WhatsApp button here, the Gmail, or whatever button that you had configured on your share sheet. So this is what people were most used to. So how many here, and the goal here is to get more people to click share and actually share something. How many people here think that the new version was better? Raise your hand. Okay, there's only 5 people. How many people here think that the control was better? Oh, that was much more people. And everyone else who didn't raise their hand, what do you guys think? Did you think there was no difference? The thing here is like it doesn't actually help you to not have an opinion, or because these are the kind of decisions that we are going to have the answer on the next page. So place your bets. It turns out the new share sheet was 40% better. And the only way to know this, which means that most of you guys were wrong, actually, by the way. The only way to know this is run an experiment. Literally a control group experiment where half of the users see the old share sheet, this one, and the other half see the new ones. And literally by controlling it, looking at statistical significance, we could determine that this was a better share sheet experience. Now, what does this do to all the people that were wrong? How do you guys feel? Well, you feel like the product decision is a little harder now. It's actually not that obvious that you're seeing at the beginning because you thought you knew it, but you didn't. You were wrong. Let's do it again. So here's an email that we're sending to our users. I'm going to describe these emails. So on the left-hand side, it says, join Joe's trip. And this is the control group. This is the existing email that we're sending. And it has basically a big button that says, join Joe's trip. I'm Joe. I invite you to a trip on Airbnb. And the new email that we tried says, accept Joe's trip invitation. And it has a little bit different design, but the call to action here says, accept Joe's trip invitation. And we're going to try to figure out which of these emails are better at getting new users to sign up from an invite to a booking. How many here think that join Joe's trip is the better email in terms of clicks? I see only 5 hands, 6 hands. How many here thinks that except Joe's trip invitation is better? That's quite a few more hands. How many here thinks there's no difference? It's actually a very common outcome of experience. So most people thought that this was a better email. You guys were right. So this, but it was 14% better in terms of open rate and click-through rate, and basically sign-up rate. That was the metric that we were most caring about here. So, but this was interesting because these emails were quite different. Like this is very different than this one. We're trying to want to understand what specifically was different, and we control for this within this email for the different things. It turned out the only thing that matters is the text on the button. The accept Joe's trip invitation is the only thing that drove the 14%. The design of the email didn't actually matter. Now, this is a more tricky one. So I'm not going to go too deep on SEO right now, but I can tell you one thing, that you can experiment towards the Google algorithm. The Google algorithm is going to rank your website somewhere on those links, on one of the numbers, and you can actually run experiments to see if showing your website this way or that way to Google is going to get you more traffic or rank you higher. So on the bottom of our listing page, you have this thing called similar listings. And we want to add a little more context here for Google so Google can understand a little bit more about the listing. So here it says more places to stay in New York, houses, blah, blah. And then it has some other neighborhoods, Brooklyn, Queens, Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Union City. And we basically split the website in half and said half of the website is going to see this, and the other half is going to see this. How many here think that this one got us more Google traffic? 1 person, 2, 3 people, 4. How many here think that this one got us more Google traffic? Most people didn't give an answer. Noted. So this was 2 more million visits. This small change had 2 more million visits, and we had a good idea that this was going to be the case, but you don't really know how good of an idea it is until you actually test it. And this led to 400,000 more nights booked in that year. Very, very big number. So what can we learn from this? We can learn that product decisions are really hard. It's easy to have a strong opinion or a big ego before you make the decision, but if the answer to the decision is right after you kind of want to change how you build product. You're going to think about, I want to get all the ideas up. I want to have kind of a discipline or some kind of function through which I actually test these ideas. So what we did at Airbnb is we had experiment review, and we did more and more of these things, and we try to come to the conclusion we can test as many things as possible and increase the number of experiments we're running, and through brainstorms get as many ideas as possible. So one more slide. I'm not going to go too deep into this. But once you have figured all these things out, you built the experiment framework, you built a product people love, then there's one more thing you're going to think really hard about, and that is, which channels should I grow my product through? So most big products are big because they found one channel to grow through, one platform or one channel. Those are Singa go through Facebook. TripAdvisor grew through Google organic search. Booking.com grew through Google Ads, Google search ads. Almost every other product has some other specific way through which they grew big. So I took this slide from Atif, who runs the growth team at LinkedIn, and basically borrowed this slide because it's such a good slide. The way to think about this is you try to match the user behavior to a specific channel. So if you're building a product that has a very rare behavior, you don't do this very often, maybe once a year, maybe once a lifetime, changing my roof, something along those lines. Most likely, if people are going to be online, they're going to go to Google to do that. They're not going to subscribe to the Instagram for roofs. They're not going to go and get the emails regularly about roofs or subscribe to a newspaper. They're going to go to Google because this is such a rare event. So if that's the case, I would explore SEO and SEM. If the user behavior is that people are already telling their friends about the product, they're already telling their friends, and for example, Airbnb is a pretty high bar to start using. It's a pretty scary product to stay for the first time in a stranger's home, or to jump in a stranger's car like you do in Uber and Lyft, not your car, like someone else's car. That's a weird behavior. In those cases, it turns out that word of mouth is a strong driver, and therefore virality and referrals are a great way to grow because you really need your friends to to convince you to start using new products. If your product gets better by having more users, then you definitely want to focus on virality. And this is a specific case for enterprise companies. You already know who your users are. You already know who those let's say 100,000 people in the world are going to use my product. let's say it's all the office managers in the United States. I know who they are. Well, I should definitely go and do sales because I already know who they are. I'm going to find a way to automate reaching them as most effectively and as fast as possible. And the last one is if I have high lifetime value, I literally have customers who are worth $30, $40, $50. Absolutely, you want to explore focusing on paid acquisition. And this is, I would say, in the last couple of years, probably the most promising platforms is both Facebook and Google. They have tremendous amount of targeting, and I've seen massive companies grown just in a couple of years by getting this right, having high LTV and figure out paid acquisition. So in summary, if you're a startup, you want to measure your retention. You want to make sure that you've built something that people want. You want to choose a North Star metric, and you want to set a goal to that metric. If you don't know how to evaluate yourself through metrics, it's going to get really hard to know if you're making progress. The best way to make decisions, not in the very early days, but once you get to some amount of scale, is to use experimentation. This is the best ways to make decisions. And when you choose how to do this, you want to focus on building principles, not individual tactics. Everyone asks me, oh, what about Airbnb? Wasn't the Craigslist post a big deal for Airbnb? Well, that was a specific tactic in a specific time, but the more important thing is the principle through which you come up with those ideas. That's what you want to focus on. And once you've done all that, you want to figure out which is the growth channel that you should invest for your company, because that will really, really matter. And you want to become expert and be the best at that growth channel.